This is Lesson 1-2, Exponents and Order of Operations. Let's start with vocabulary. Our first word is simplify. Simplify means to replace a numerical expression with its simplest name. For example, if you were to simplify the expression 9 minus 7, you would get 2. 2 is its simplest name. An exponent tells how many times a number. A base is used as a factor, and a power has two parts, a base and an exponent. For this example, I'll just give you one for all three. How about 4 cubed? In 4 cubed, 2 is our exponent, or 3 is our exponent. 4 is our base. And the whole thing, 4 cubed, is the power. 4 cubed really means 4 times 4 times 4. It means 4 times itself 3 times. Today we're working on order of operations. So we have these 4 steps here. The first thing is always to perform any operations inside grouping symbols. Second, we simplify powers. Third, multiply and divide in order from left to right. And fourth, add and subtract in order from left to right. Now you may have heard this differently as PEMDAS or please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. So PEMDAS really should have been GEMDAS because it's not just parentheses, it's really all grouping symbols including brackets and parentheses. E, of course, stands for exponents. M, multiplication. D, division. A, addition. And S, subtraction. And there's also something special about multiplication, division, addition, subtraction, which is written right here. We always multiply and divide from left to right and add and subtract from left to right. That means we don't always multiply first or always divide first. We multiply and divide from left to right, whichever comes first. So there's another way I write this, PEMDAS. Usually I just write PEMDAS like this, and you may write it across the top of your paper. And I always put an arrow underneath the MD and the AS to remind myself I always work these operations from left to right. Of course, we always multiply and divide before we add and subtract, but within multiplication division, we just work these left to right. Let's look at our first example, simplifying a numerical expression. So we need to simplify 32 plus 6 squared minus 14 times 3. Again, we're following PEMDAS, where we know we always multiply and divide left to right and add, subtract left to right. So first I want to look for any parentheses or grouping symbols. I don't see any, so we can move on to E, which is exponents, and we do have exponents. 6 squared, so that's where we'll start, and everything else needs to be left alone. So I have 32 plus 6 squared means 6 times 6, which is 36, minus 14 times 3. Now that we've done our exponents, you can even put a little check mark if you'd like. We move on to the next set, multiplication division, in which we work left to right. We have addition, subtraction. Finally, we have some multiplication. So that's the next thing I'm going to do, 14 times 3, and everything else stays the same. 32 plus 36 minus 14 times 3, 42. Now that we only have 2 signs left, addition, subtraction, or 2 operations left, we're moving on to addition, subtraction, which again is work left to right. So I'll just start with 32 plus 36, which is 68. Minus 42, and finally 68 minus 42, 26. And there's our answer for example 1, 26. Let's look at a couple more. Quick check 1, simplify each expression. Again, we're following PEMDAS. Remember that we always work multiplication, division left to right, and addition, subtraction left to right. And looking at this first one, again, I see no parentheses or grouping symbols, so I'm going to go right to my exponents. Leave everything else alone. 4 times 7 plus 4 divided by 2 squared means 2 times 2, and 2 times 2 is 4. Since we've done our exponents, we now want to move on to multiplication division. Again, work those left to right. So I come to multiplication first. 4 times 7, 28, plus 4 divided by 4. Leave the rest alone. And then division, we always multiply, divide before we add or subtract, so I have to divide first. So I have 28 plus 4 divided by 4, which is 1. And 28 plus 1 is finally 29. One more of these. Again, no parentheses, so we start with exponents. 5 cubed, which means 5 times 5 times 5. 5 times 5 is 25, times 5 is 125, plus 90 divided by 10. And now, since our only choices are to add or divide, I'll divide first. We always multiply or divide before we add or subtract. So we have 125 plus 90 divided by 10, which is 9. And finally, addition, 125 plus 9 is 134. Moving on to example 2, evaluating an algebraic expression. They want us to evaluate 5x plus 3 squared divided by p for x equals 2 and p equals 3. When they ask us to evaluate, they're really just asking us to solve. But when we're solving one of these kind of problems, we're also going to have to substitute. And substitute just means everywhere you see a letter, put in that number that they've told you to use for that letter. So x is 2, so where there's an x, I'll put a 2. And p is 3, so where I have a p, I'll put a 3. And then we're going to substitute and solve. So I have 5. Now since this is 5 times x, then I'm going to do 5 times 2 plus 3 squared divided by p, which is 3. And now we can just work our PEMDAS. Again, remember, multiplication, division, and addition, subtraction are worked left to right. So I'll start with no parentheses or grouping symbols, so exponents. 3 squared, so 5 times 2 plus 3 squared just means 3 times 3, which is 9, divided by 3. And then, since we're done with exponents, we'll move on to multiplication, division. We work those left to right, so multiplication is first. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 9, divided by 3. And we always have to multiply and divide before we add or subtract. So 10 plus 9 divided by 3 is 3, and 10 plus 3 is 13. Great, let's do a couple more of those. Evaluate each expression for c equals 2 and d equals 5. So again, when you evaluate, your first step is always to substitute, and then to apply PEMDAS to solve for an answer. So D then is 5 plus 6, and since again this is 6 times C, I'll do 6 times C, which is 2, divided by 4. And now we can apply PEMDAS. So according to PEMDAS, I need to do parentheses first, don't have any, and then exponents, again, don't have any. So we'll work our multiplication, division, left to right, and then addition, subtraction, left to right. So the first thing I get to is multiplication. 5 plus 6 times 2 is 12, divided by 4. And then we need to divide. 5 plus 12 divided by 4 is 3. And 5 plus 3 is 8. Let's do one more. We'll do D. So I have 40 minus D squared plus CD times 3. Again, our first step is always to substitute. C is 2, D is 5. So everywhere I see a D, I'll put a 5, and everywhere I see a C, I'll put a 2. So I have 40 minus D, again, is 5 squared plus C is 2. And since this is C times D, I'll do 2 times 5 times 3. And now we'll apply PEMDAS, which says parentheses or grouping symbols first. Don't have any. So I'll move on to exponents. 40 minus 5 squared is 25 plus 2 times 5 times 3. And now we need to work our multiplication, division, left to right. So the first multiplication I get to is 2 times 5. 40 minus 25 plus 2 times 5 is 10 times 3. Again, we have to multiply before we can add or subtract. So 40 minus 25 plus 10 times 3 is 30. And then we get to our addition, subtraction. Again, we don't add before we subtract or subtract before we add. We just work them left to right. It's always whichever one comes first. So we'll subtract first. 40 minus 25 is 15. plus 30. 15 plus 30 is 45. Example 3. Find the total cost of a pair of jeans if the price is $32 and the sales tax is 8%. This is a great problem because it's something we do every day, but we don't know exactly what we're doing. We're always buying things. We all buy things. Every time you buy a pair of jeans or a t-shirt, you know that whatever the price is listed as is not actually the price you pay, and that's because you're adding on sales tax. So we know that our total cost is $32 and whatever our tax is. So that's what we want to figure out. How do we know how much tax we're going to pay? Well, the tax rate is 8%. And it's 8% of whatever our price is. We know our price in this case. Our price is $32, so it's 8% of our price, which is $32. Our tax rate's 8%, so that means we're going to pay 8% of whatever our price is, which in this case is $32. Well, what does of mean? Of tells us to multiply. So I need to do 8% times 32. And to multiply with a percent, I have to change that percent to a decimal. So I'll put my decimal here and move it 2 times to the left to create 0.08 or 800 times 32. And there we get our tax rate. So it's going to be $32 plus 8% times 32. Or we can leave out this times sign, and we can put our times 32 using parentheses. That looks good. And now we'll just solve. So C equals 32 plus, put this in your calculator, 0.08 times 32 gives you $2.56. And finally we add C equals 32 plus 256, $34.56. And that's our total cost. Anytime you finish a word problem, ask yourself, does that seem reasonable? Does it seem reasonable that my $32 pair of jeans will end up costing me $34.56? I think so. That's not much more, but it is a little bit more because we know we're going to pay a little bit more in tax. So basically your general formula is your cost equals the price plus whatever your tax rate is times the price. In this case, our tax rate was 8%, but if it had been 5%, we would have done 0.05, or 10%, 0.1. So you have to adjust for whatever your tax rate is. Oh, this is our answer though, so let's box that. All right, quick check 3. The equation C equals P plus 500 times P represents the cost C of an item with a price P and a 5% sales tax. Make a table to find the cost of items with prices $5, $10, $15, and $20. Okay, this sounds pretty complicated, but really they've given us everything we need. First of all, they want us to find cost. Cost is what we're finding, and cost, we're using C for cost. So if it's what I'm finding, I'm going to put it over here all the way in the third column because I know I'm going to have to do some work to get over here. They've given us our price P. We know exactly what our price is, so that's going to go over here. The price P is all these numbers here, 5, 10, 15, and 20. So I already know what these are, $5, $10, $15, and $20. Now what goes in the middle? Well, our equation goes in the middle because we have to use this equation to find our cost. So we have C equals P plus 0.05 P. And we know all of our prices, and so we're just going to plug in our prices for P or substitute our prices for P in order to find C. So I have, and you can leave out the C really, so I have 5 plus 0.05 times 5. And then when price is $10, I have 10 plus 0.05 times 10. When price is $15, 15 plus 0.05 times 15. And finally, when our price is $20, 20 plus 0.05 times 20. And now all you have to do is get your calculator out. And again, make sure you're following PEMDAS. We want to always multiply before we add to solve all these. So 500 times 5, or 0.05 times 5, is 25 cents, 0.25. So our total is 5 plus 25 cents, so it's $5.25. Let me just write what I did right here. I multiplied these two together and I got 0.25. So then when I added 5 plus 0.25, we got 525. I'll do the same thing on the rest of these. 0.05 times 10 is 0.5, and 10 plus 0.5 is 10.5. But since we're talking about money, I'm going to put a 0 here, so it's $10.50. On the third one, same thing, multiply 15 times 0.05, and we get 0.75. So it's 15 plus 0.75, or $15.75. And finally, 0.05 times 20 is $1. So $20 plus $1 gives us $21. And we have example 4, simplifying an expression with parentheses. Simplify 3 times the quantity 8 plus 6 divided by the quantity 4 squared minus 10. Where do we start? Well, PEMDAS, let's bring back our old friend PEMDAS. We're going to start with our parentheses, and this time we actually do have some parentheses. Does it matter which parentheses we start with? No. We can start with either one, but personally I like to go in order left to right, so I'm going to start here with 8 plus 6. What am I doing with this 3 and then this, well, I said it earlier, 3 times the quantity 8 plus 6, so this is still 3 times 8 plus 6, and 8 plus 6 is 14, and leave the rest alone. Divided by print the quantity, 4 squared minus 10. And next, we have to work on our other set of parentheses, so we're over here now, but within our parentheses, what do we do first? Well, we have to follow PEMDAS within our parentheses. So, am I going to do my exponents first or subtracts first? PEMDAS says exponents first, so I'm going to do 4 squared first. So leave everything else alone. 3 times 14 divided by, leave your parentheses because we still have stuff inside our parentheses. 4 squared is 16 minus 10. Again, we left our parentheses because we haven't gotten it down to one number yet. You only get to get rid of your parentheses when you have completely simplified it down to one number, and we're not there yet. So we're still working on our parentheses. Now I'll do 16 minus 10. So 3 times 14 divided by 16 minus 10 is 6. And according to PEMDAS, since I only have multiplication division left, I just need to work those left to right. So 3 times 14 is 42 divided by 6. 42 divided by 6 is 7. Let's do one more of those. Again, we're simplifying the expression using PEMDAS. So since we have parentheses or grouping symbols, that's where we'll start. And again, I just like to work left to right, so I'm going to start with 9 minus 7. So we have 8 divided by, leave everything else alone. 9 minus 7 is simply 2, so we've simplified it to one number. We can get rid of our parentheses, plus 13 divided by 2. And now we have to get rid of our other set of parentheses, so I'll do 13 divided by 2, 8 divided by 2, plus 13 divided by 2 is 6.5. Now our options are to divide or add. I know I need to divide before I add, so that's 8 divided by 2, which is 4, plus 6 and 5/10. 4 plus 6 and 5/10. Again, if you want to work that off to the side, make sure you're lining up your decimals when you add. So to put the 4 here, because the decimal's after it, and a 0. So when we add, bring your 0 plus 5 is 5, bring down your decimal, and 6 plus 4 is 10, so we get 10 and 5/10 as our answer. Example 5, evaluating expressions with exponents. Evaluate each expression for x equals 11 and z equals 16. So all we're going to do is, again, when we evaluate, we substitute and solve. So first we're going to substitute x is 11. So this is x times z. I'm going to do 11 times. Z is 16. And then square it. Again, we're following PEMDAS. PEMDAS tells us to take care of our parentheses before we take care of our exponents. So first I'm going to multiply 11 times 16, and we get 176. And then we need to square it. 176 squared is 30,976. And that's something you would do in your calculator. I hope you, well, it'd be awesome if you could do it in your head, but most of us need to use a calculator to find that answer. Let's look at B. Now think about it. Do you think B is going to have a larger answer or a smaller answer than A? Take a second. Now let's substitute the numbers and see what you think. X is 11. Since this is x times d, it's 11 times 16 squared. Now looking at it, do you think A or B has the greater answer? Let's find out. So over here we had to take care of our parentheses first. Here we have no parentheses, so we're going to move right on to our exponent, 16 squared. And 16 squared is 256, so we have 11 times 256. And then we need to multiply 11 times 256, which is 2,816. So which one was greater? Obviously, A was much, much greater. And the reason for that is first we multiplied and then we squared it. We squared a huge number. Over here, all we did was square 16, so it wasn't that big. Let's look at one more. Evaluate the expression for r equals 9 and t equals 14. So again, when we evaluate, we substitute and solve. So the first thing I'm going to do is substitute. R is 9, so I have 9 squared. And since there's no addition, subtraction, multiplication, division sign here, I know I'm automatically multiplying, so it's times 14. 9 squared is 81, exponents first, always, times 14, and 81 times 14 is 1,134. Great. Let's look at example 6. Almost done. Simplifying an expression. So all we've done here is just add more grouping symbols. Our new grouping symbols are these brackets right here. And when you have brackets, just think of it like parentheses again. So when you have brackets and then you have parentheses inside, you're still following PEMDAS or GEMDAS, because now we have these other grouping symbols to deal with. You just want to go to the innermost. You want to start on the very most inside first. Basically, 4 will be the last thing you do. And this is 4 times the quantity, 2 times 9 plus the quantity, 15 divided by 3 squared. So this will be the last thing we do. So I have 4 times the quantity. I'm leaving that alone because I know that's the last thing I'm going to do is take care of this 4 times everything else. So inside, and you can think of this as a totally separate problem. So just ignore the 4 and the brackets. Just pretend this is your problem for right now. So if this is my problem, what would I do first? Well, parentheses, obviously. Does it matter which one? No, but I like to work left to right. So we'll start with 2 times 9. 2 times 9 is 18, plus, leave everything else alone, 15 divided by 3 squared, close the bracket. Again, think of what's inside the brackets as a separate problem. So focus on that. Ignore the 4 in the brackets for now until we get all this simplified in here. So I have 4, open bracket, 18 plus. Now again, we're still working on parentheses. We have to get rid of these parentheses before we can work on anything else in here. So I have 15 divided by 3. 15 divided by 3 is 5. And remember that was squared, so it's 5 squared now. Okay, now we've gotten rid of all of our parentheses, so I'm going to take care of these exponent, or this exponent right here. So I have 4 times the quantity, 18 plus 5 squared is 25. And finally, we're down to one operation, 18 plus 25. So if you want, you can leave the brackets because it still means to multiply, just like parentheses, and then just add 18 plus 25, which is 43. And finally, we have 4 times 43, which gives us 172. So you can use brackets, or you can use parentheses, or you can use a time sign, whatever you want to do. But once you've gotten this down to 43, you know that you're multiplying 4 times this because the brackets work just like parentheses. All right, let's look at 2 more as quickly as we can. Again, ignore everything outside the brackets and just focus on what's inside the brackets. We want to start inside and then work our way out. So the very innermost, we have to take care of the parentheses first. So 12 plus 3, leave that alone. 18 minus 5 times the quantity. And again, this is multiplication. 5 times what's inside the parentheses. 16 minus 13 is 3. And remember that parentheses are not only grouping symbols, but also a multiplication operation. So you can leave the parentheses, just recognize they're no longer a grouping symbol. Now it just means to multiply. So since we have multiplication in here, I need to multiply before I subtract. So we have 12 plus 3 times the quantity, 18, minus 5 times 3 is 15. And then we still need to get rid of these brackets before we can move out here. So I'll subtract 18 minus 15. So I have 12 plus 3. And again, this means to multiply. So you can change it to a multiplication sign because now we're down to one number. 18 minus 15 is 3. And now it's a very simple PEMDAS problem. Do we multiply first or add first? Always multiply before you add. So we have, 12 plus 9. Let me make that a little neater. 12 plus 9, and 12 plus 9 is, of course, 21. All right, let's look at one more, and then we'll move on to the last example. Again, we want to go to the innermost first, so we want to start with these parentheses in here, 2 plus 1. Leave the rest alone, 5 plus the quantity, and then 2 plus 1 is 3, and it was 2 plus 1 cubed, so it's 3 cubed minus 3. And then inside our brackets, we want to do our exponents before we subtract. So we have 5 plus 3 cubed. 3 times 3 is 9 times 3 is 27 minus 3. And this is our last operation inside our brackets, so we can get rid of them. 5 plus 27 minus 3 is 24, and 5 plus 24 is 29. Great. Last example, example 7. A carpenter wants to build 3 decks in the shape of regular hexagons. The perimeter P of each deck will be 60 feet. The perpendicular distance A from the center of each deck to one of the sides will be 8 and 7/10 feet. Use the formula A equals 3 times the quantity PA divided by 2 to find the total area of all 3 decks. Now I know that word problems look scary and it seems like it's going to be really hard, but we can already pick out some things that are going to be really, really important. Since it's math, we know all these numbers are important, so I'm going to start by highlighting those. Also, anytime we see a formula, that's usually very important. As I'm looking at my formula, I see that it has this P and this A in here, and I've seen the P and the A in my problem. So what does P stand for? Well, P is our perimeter, and our perimeter was the 60. So we know what P is. It says perimeter is 60 feet. So I know my perimeter. And then it said the perpendicular distance, A. So our perpendicular distance is A, and it's 8.7 feet. So I know what P and A is. They want me to find total area. Well, that's just my capital A. And if I know the P and the A, I can definitely find my capital A. So even though it was very wordy and looked very scary, really all we have to do is take this formula, A equals 3 times the quantity, PA divided by 2, and substitute in our numbers for our letters in here. So we're evaluating. So I have A equals 3 times the quantity, P again, P was the 60, so 60 feet. And since this is P times A, it's 60 feet times A is 8 and 7/10 feet divided by 2. Okay, this is just a PEMDAS problem. What does PEMDAS tell us to do first? We always do our parentheses or grouping symbols first, so I'm going to start in here. Then inside my parentheses, I have to multiply before I divide, because in addition to working left to right, we also work top to bottom. So first I'll multiply and then we'll divide. So I have 3 times the quantity, 60 times 8.7 is 522. Feet times feet is feet squared, and then that's divided by 2. So our next step will be to do our division. So I have 3 times the quantity. What is 522 divided by 2? 261 feet squared. And remember, this is a great time to have a calculator handy. So finally, we do 3 times the quantity, 261 feet squared, which gives us 783 feet squared. And there's your answer. So all we did was take the information from the word problem, substitute it in for the letters, and then solve. Let's look at one more. This is like the problems from your homework. volume equals the area of the base times the height divided by 3. So we're going to take this formula, substitute our numbers, and solve. So I have V equals area of the base times the height divided by 3. Substitute in our numbers. Area of the base is 21 inches squared. This is B times H, so I'll multiply it times H, which is 13 inches, and then divide by 3. Again, along with working left to right, we work top to bottom. So first I need to multiply 21 times 13. 21 times 13 is 273. Inches squared times inches is inches cubed. And then we have that divided by 3. Finally, we need to divide. So divide 273 inches cubed by 3, and you get 91 inches cubed. And that's lesson 1-2.